I had a pastor in New York who said one time, which I appreciate, he said, marriage can do a lot for you. But he also kind of basically said it's not everything, right? And it can do a lot for you. Marriage is a good thing. Like we opened up with, in Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone. God made a helper suitable for him. So I think that's a good thing. And I like what you said, Brogan, about really just we need to be seeking first his kingdom, his righteousness, and all the rest will be added to us. We just trust that God has our best in mind. We just keep focused on him, keep pursuing Christ. I do think, as a church, we could do a better job of discussing the factors that go into why marriage rates are plummeting. I think this podcast is a good start to kind of highlighting some of those things, and I'd like to see more people in the church talking about, the root causes, because there really is it's a trend in society that this is trending down and it's not good. And so we need to, as a church, really get together and talk about this.
It's the Reform or Die podcast, where nothing is off limits and everything must be reformed.
Welcome back to the Reform or Die podcast. It's your host, Kyle, and we have Brogan in-house.
It's good to be here.
And also Jacob.
Hello.
So we figured we would talk a little bit about a sort of a reaction to a Steven Crowder episode about marriage, data on marriage rates in 2026. Really, some of the data is really from 2025, but interesting stuff. But before we got into that, we were actually, before the podcast, kind of talking a little bit banter about this whole UFC event at the White House. Yeah. I thought it was a multi-day thing. I was corrected. It was just a single day event. I did not watch direct, but I watched clips and things. So
it was a single day. You should have seen it. It was truly something. It was pretty cool. It was very American. It was sponsored by Monster. They had the red, white, and blue Monster can everywhere.
I gotta say, the setup was sick.
The setup was pretty sick. They had a really cool flyover. All the fighters, their walkout, they literally walked out of the White House, and they were flanked on either side by a law enforcement officer of some sort, and then a Medal of Honor recipient. So it was pretty cool.
Was it out of the Oval they were walking out?
It depended on, they walked out of different parts depending on which fight it was. Okay. I think once you got to like the more main event fights, they actually came out of the Oval Office and walked by the Joe Biden auto pen portrait, which is pretty funny. But
that is hilarious. And now they've got the Declaration in there in the Oval Office, right?
I didn't know that.
Or something like that. It's on the wall in there, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong about that. Brogan will fact check me, when he gets home, and then he'll be like, "What were you talking about?"
I thought Nick Cage got that.
Yeah, I think he took it.
Yeah, but no, it was.
Or did he protect it? I can't remember.
He took it.
He took it. A little bit of both.
But it was really cool. The fights were good. All the fights were knockouts or technical knockouts. None of them went the distance. They all ended in like the second or third round. So it was a action-packed fight card.
Was John Jones fighting, or was that just like a rumor that he didn't actually fight?
No,
he didn't fight, right?
No, he did not fight.
But who is I guess Alex Pereira? How you say his last name? Pereira? Alex Pereira?
I'm not sure.
I think he didn't do so well.
Yeah,
to my knowledge, but he was trying to go up a weight class or 3.
Yeah, I watched the fights. I don't really keep up with fighting UFC at all.
I don't really know enough to.
I just know it was a good fight, good fights. We had some American victories. We had a couple of Brazilians win too. I guess. Shout out Brazil. You're still technically, American, South American, so we'll just count that as our win.
We'll allow it.
But yeah, it was cool. After the fact, I guess we all kind of maybe saw the news involving a foiled terrorist attack. That was planned for the fight.
So that was a thing.
Yeah.
Apparently the FBI caught I don't know who it was, someone from California, I think, connection that wanted to do a drone attack / sniper attack.
Yeah. So
Crazy thing.
The headline that I saw, it said a 23-person plot for a drone / sniper attack at the UFC event, which, put my tinfoil hat on. If it was a 23-person plot, that means there were 2 people who were plotting and then 21 federal agents.
Right. I mean, after the Whitmer kidnapping story where you figured out that like more than half of them were federal agents.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's crazy. I think everyone kind of had a feeling that something like that might happen. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but it's like with how everything's been going recently, it wouldn't have been surprising. And I was honestly surprised that nothing did happen. And then I see this after the fact. I'm like, oh, okay.
I will say, though, they fake it when it's, towards a left-wing governor. But, there haven't been a lot of fakes when it's coming towards the right. I mean, the guy that ran into the White House correspondence or the press correspondence dinner or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, what is that? It's like 4 times in the last year.
Yeah, it's crazy how many there's attempts there's been. Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, that's a kind of a bit of relevant news before we really jump into too much. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say, other than it was a really crazy... I mean, it's pretty awesome looking, the White House lawn and everything. And they redid the reflecting pool, I think, in front of the...
that's what I heard.
It's amazing looking. Yeah.
I still don't ever want to go to DC, but...
And a bunch of the fountains they like cleaned up. I've got graffiti off of them and stuff. Like DC's apparently looking pretty good. I'm not there regularly, but...
What'd you say, Bergen?
I said I've been there.
You've been to DC?
Yeah.
What'd you think of it?
I mean, it was kind of cool. Like, it was cool to see all the different monuments and stuff. So I got to see the Lincoln Memorial and saw the White House and the Washington Monument. So it was cool to walk around all those. We like rode the Lime scooters to each one and got to walk around and see them. But I mean, I can't say I would like definitely want to live there. I don't enjoy like just the big city kind of feel, but it was really cool. I would say it's worth a visit. There's a lot of big monuments and memorable things. So worth the visit. I'm glad I've been, but I don't feel the need to go again unless I'm just in the area.
Do you feel like you came back from the halls of power and you were like leveled up basically?
Yeah, I feel way stronger now. I mean, I feel like I can just go take over.
Feel like you understand our government at a levels that were never before seen,
No, definitely not.
Okay.
But it's crazy how like, I guess normal it is when you're there. Like you can just kind of like walk up to anything and I don't know. Sometimes you're like, I feel like I shouldn't be able to just like walk right up to the Lincoln Monument or like even the Capitol. Like you could walk right up and go into the Capitol, like, which is just, I think, crazy to me, considering also all the different assassination attempts and those kind of things. But I didn't, but you can just stand on the front lawn and it's cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I still don't think I want to go. Maybe one day.
Other, random things before we jump into our sort of main topic of the data on marriage rates and such today. But I wanted to do a full episode on this sometime, but basically election integrity stuff is crazy. And California just had some elections that are absolutely bonkers. They just keep counting votes until they get the results they want. And anyway, it's crazy. I don't know if you guys saw that Spencer Pratt video after the third party candidate magically had ballots go like flip like an insane degree for her to like, she'd already conceded like on the first day and then she like in tears. And then like, I don't know how long it was afterward, magically all these Skid Row votes came in for her at unbelievable rates to where she actually, beat out Spencer Pratt. But he released a just absolute fire video about how corrupt California is. And he's suing Karen Bass, who's like the person who got the most votes. Her brother basically was like, helping, they're like co-suing her or something like that. It's like a crazy story. Anyway, I don't know all about it, but all I know is California elections are corrupt as the day is long, basically. So it's something we should turn into a full episode sometime, but it's a pretty wild deal. I had something else, but now I don't remember what it was. So just my genius material here, So I think maybe we just jump into our video and kind of give a little bit of a reaction to this. But before that, I think Jacob has a Bible verse for us. We are trying to really get super anchored in the word here before we watch a Steven Crowder video, So
I don't know why you said it so sarcastic.
I love Steven Crowder. I'll admit it.
Yeah, I mean the verse I have, it's short and sweet, but I think it's appropriate. It is Genesis 2:18. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him.
And God bless that verse. Brogan's over here nodding his head, right, Brogan?
No comment for now.
No comment.
For now.
All right. So, we got this video here. The video is titled "The Data on Marriage is Terrifying." So, it's kind of a weird time in 2026 to be in America. And, there's, I think, a lot of people at our church that are single, unmarried, I would say pretty high numbers.
Probably, yeah. I mean, without going around and asking people, I would say just based on the vibes, it seems like there's a lot of single people.
I've heard in the realm of 200 to 400. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, enough for us to have conferences about these kinds of things. And, it's difficult, some of these things, these topics. So, don't be dismayed by all the stats. Don't let your heart be, if you have your heart set on marriage and this is all, necessarily easy to listen to, don't always let the stats, steer you into despair. But I mean, here we go. This is Steven Crowder to start us off here.
We are actually now going to be discussing something I would say is the most important issue facing the United States. And I've said this many times. I think that cultural issues have much more significance than a lot of our political institutions. And it doesn't mean that political institutions don't determine a lot of what takes place in culture, but many Americans, politics is kind of a team sport, how people view it, or they view it as something that is just dirty no matter what. So they often don't pay attention to it, but they are constantly affected by, and they are constantly inundated with whatever the culture deems acceptable, or whatever the culture deems necessary to propagandize people with, which we have seen. We've seen one specific worldview being thrust upon the American public since the 1960s. That's how they've achieved power over our institutions. It really began, you can go back to the 30s, 40s, but 1960s was that tipping point, came to fruition in the 70s, thanks to Marxism, thanks to feminism. And by the way, feminism cannot exist without Marxism. We're not talking about a woman who wants to go be a nurse. No, that was never a problem. We're talking about the idea that men and women are fundamentally interchangeable, and there's no ideal scenario in which to rear children. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about feminism.
Mm-hmm. So the video is kind of about feminism / falling marriage / falling birth rates. But he's kind of making the point that, people, and I've experienced this with a lot of my friends, they've kind of checked out of politics because they're just like, it's so corrupt. And so they don't really pay attention. And they're not up to date on like all the crazy, insane things that are happening in our country, which fair. To some extent, you can't keep up with everything. And it's, imagine you just kind of get to a point where you're like, it's so corrupt. It just doesn't do me any good to listen to more. I can understand. I know people that are going, in that space. So, but what he is saying is, these issues do kind of trickle down, and we're at a place where from the 60s to the 70s, culture changed dramatically, and the family is no longer, this is kind of the point he's about to get into. It's no longer really the core of society. And, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I would say, we've kind of switched from families being the core unit of society to workers. Everybody's a worker now. And that's sort of the reality. And that has affected marriage rates. And, if everyone's working, who's having kids, or who's staying home with the kids, right? So there's a lot to be said for all these things. But any comments so far from you guys?
I don't want to jump the gun too much, so I'll probably not go
Keep
too
your powder
much,
dry. Keep
too
your
much
powder dry.
into detail. But I very much agree. It's just, I think I'm also someone who probably struggles more with the side of like trying to not check out, because it just can be so overwhelming of like so much info, so much to trying to keep up with. I feel like half the things you read and see you can't trust because it was some media team just trying to say the exact thing to stretch the truth as much as they wanted. And I think it's just tough to kind of see both sides doing that a lot. And so I just think it can be a struggle. And then not to mention just, economy and trying to even just survive in the day-to-day life of, you don't have enough money to survive. You're trying to eat healthy enough to not get all the different cancers of every food that can, give it to you. And then not to mention trying to find a good wife, good spouse, those kind of things, and how that can trickle over into the the politics side of it as well. So
That was a good summary. Jacob?
Yeah, I guess commenting on kind of what he said about men and women being interchangeable in this system that's been brought into place. It goes back to Genesis, right? We were talking about this a little bit before, because right after God talks about making a helper suitable for man, talks about how, he had Adam name every beast of every creature of the land and the sky, and Adam didn't find a suitable helper, right? Thank goodness too.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. But then God created woman, right? Woman is like a separate creation, right? A different thing, not the same thing as a man. And the Bible is very clear on that. So like from the Christian perspective, men and women are unique. They're very different. They have very unique and important roles, each one. But yeah, this I guess Marxist culture that he's talking about with the feminist movement, it very much tried to flip that on its head. It's like an inversion of scripture and just saying, yeah, you're all the same actually. Like you're not a thoughtfully created being with a specific purpose. You're just another cog in the machine. And we've gotten really far down that path. And I think we see the effects of that in a lot of things, including marriage rates and birth rates and all that.
Yeah, sometimes, we don't reflect on Genesis 1-3 enough. And there's so much packed into that section of scripture that you could really dwell on it for a long, long time. But yeah, men and women were not created at the same time and in the same way. I mean, woman was taken from a rib, and it says man was created from the dust. So it's just interesting. But yeah, we'll keep rolling with this here.
And it does follow in Marxism. We now have marriage rates, and we now have a fundamentally different American society because the central building block is not families. Now, for those of you who may not be aware of the history, and you can go through all the feminists, Rachel Wilson is very good on this. You can go through even sort of pseudo-existentialists, Simone de Beauvoir, Judith Butler. All of them either expressed subversely or blatantly the need to destroy the American nuclear family. So this comes from 1970. The American feminist Kate Millett said that the complete destruction of traditional marriage and the nuclear family is the revolutionary or utopian goal of feminism. Noted feminists often cited, by the way, I'm using the ones who are cited by those on the left. If you go to their blogs, if you go to their websites, Shulamith Firestone.
No relation.
Wrote, unless revolution uproots the basic social organization, the biological family, the vinculum through which the psychology of power can always be smuggled, the tapeworm of exploitation will never be annihilated.
Wow.
Then you have another feminist, Linda Gordon, said, the nuclear family must be destroyed and we must find a different way of living together. And think about that. It must be destroyed. The biological family must find a different way of living together. That's hard, and it wasn't super palatable, and so it changes to, did we say a different way? We meant to say it takes a village. And what do we have now? Well, people aren't getting married anymore.
So a lot there, but I remember when I was living in New York, a lot of those names were thrown around. Just a lot of feminist literature people were referencing out that way, and so it isn't something I don't know if you guys have heard those names before or not, but I definitely heard some of them. I've never read any of them direct myself, but they had some good big words in there. Viculum, I never heard that one before. So there you go. There's your word of the day, Brogan. But yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was pretty straightforward there. He's just saying things have changed with feminism. We've told a generation of people that family is not good, basically. And you see that. I mean, women who are celebrating being career women over being mothers, it's like one of these is really more in line with, I think, the purpose of your life. I'm not saying everyone has to be a mother. I'm not saying that, but, I think we should be celebrating motherhood, celebrating families, and I don't know that it's almost like become taboo to do that.
Yeah, I think it's crazy if you look about kind of how quickly it's flipped and how I would say a lot of moms, especially maybe stay-at-home moms, are looked down upon by their peers, by the people that, you know, have gone and got a full-time career, which is just crazy to me. It doesn't make any sense that, like, everyone complains about their job. Everyone goes to work and is, you know, annoyed that they have to go to work to some extent. You know, obviously people can like their job, but like to some extent you're like, oh, got to go back to the 9 to 5. But we've still somehow glorified that over being able to raise a family and be able to, you know, raise kids that love the Lord. And even in Christian circles, it's interesting to me that, like, that is still, I would say, somewhat looked down upon, which, you know, I think it's crazy that that's the case now. I think obviously not everyone, you know, it's not like it's just straight cut lines and that if you're a woman, you have to be a mom and you have no other purpose besides bringing children into the world. Like, that's obviously not, I don't think, the design. I mean, some women can't have kids, and so I think, you know, God has a purpose. Like, I think each person still, to some extent, has some sort of unique purpose. Like, God can use each person for something, but I think there's also very clear-cut lines of what kind of a general, more of a general rule for what men have been designed for and what women have been designed for, kind of referencing back to Genesis. I don't remember which verse that was, but I don't know. It's just crazy to me that, like, you even look at the family dynamics and how that's, I think, just hurting I think all the way up to the government structure, but just we are no longer dependent on families, no longer looking at that and how it's tearing families apart and how it's not I don't think it's good for our country. I don't think it's good for just the world even. I think it's crazy to see how looked down upon it is to have a family in a lot of ways, and how we need to, I think that's where joy comes from too, you know, like raising kids, disciplining your kids, showing them how to love the Lord, what that looks like. And you can have so much joy. Like, I don't know, coming from a big family, I loved it and thought it was amazing, very grateful for my parents. So I think it's just crazy the kind of direction that we've gone in.
Yeah, agreed with that. Jacob, any thoughts?
Yeah. It is just like something we've harped on a lot on here, but to me, the fact that this goes on in the church, it's just another example of the church kind of grafting itself into the culture of the world as opposed to having, like, influencing the culture, right? We just kind of allow this satanic inversion of normality of what God's intended design. It's just infected culture, and we just kind of allow it to come into the church because we don't think of it in those terms. We're like, oh, that's just how things are. But in reality, we should be pushing back against it. We should have a counterculture, and we should be seeking to shift the culture broadly in this nation and in the world towards a culture that follows biblical norms, right? It wasn't always like this. This is a new thing. It's a very deliberate push towards this, and they're good at it. They're really, really good at it. They can push their agenda, the Marxists or the feminists or whoever we want to call it. They can push their agenda without us even realizing it. We just gobble it up. We make it our own even, and it's poison.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, there's always, anytime you're talking to a large group of people, a one size fits all doesn't fit everybody exactly, right? But there's still, you have to be able to give a main message. And, you know, that's why we have counter examples like Jesus and the Apostle Paul, who were single, right? You know, but they weren't the norm. You know, the norm was to get married, you know, and have families. And that's, you know, they were amazing exceptions to the rule. And there will be people like that. So if you think you're an exception to this rule, you know, and we're not trying to, you know, say, hey, you should do it the reform or die way, basically. But we do want to say, like, look, we're noticing trends, and trends are people aren't getting married anymore. And we won't have a society if people don't get married and have kids. I mean, society does collapse. Population collapse is actually a thing. I know a lot of people think that the world's going to overpopulate, but a lot of data indicating that that's not really the case. So
I think there are people with legitimate arguments, right? Where they can say, this specific role, it just doesn't fit for me because of X, Y, Z. And there's legitimate arguments there things that they literally can't help. They can't do anything about it. And there's always God always has a plan for people, even if they can't, perfectly follow whatever the ideal biblical model is for a family or for a husband and a wife. Sometimes like Brogan said, people can be unable to have kids, or even look at widowers, people where one of the spouses dies, it's kind of hard to follow that and have a big family if your spouse dies, right? But I think more often than not, people will almost come up with their own excuses and kind of use that excuse to cover themselves and say, hey, I can't do it that way because, it's inconvenient, or because it would be really difficult for me. And that's not really a good excuse. That's just that's a lack of motivation. That is priorities being in the wrong place. And it kind of cheapens it for the people who legitimately can't have something, And I don't think we should be looking to make excuses. We should be seeking to sacrifice whatever we have to sacrifice, and be seeking to do what God commands us to do as to the best of our abilities, right?
So maybe I should ask this. 1 second. So maybe I can ask, why do you think marriage rates are falling? Maybe we should just watch a little more, or do you want to dive into that early here and just say, what do you feel like are some trends? I guess we can keep going, and then maybe we'll comment on that here in a second.
I think he's probably going to address it directly, but we can comment on it once we get through a little bit more.
Yeah, sounds good. Here we go.
So I want to ask you a few fundamental questions here before I make the case for you and give you some historical data. Do you believe that for Western civilization, certainly Christian Western civilization, right, the United States, as we want to conserve, that's what we mean by conservatism. Do you mean for that to exist, do you believe that marriage, or at least maybe we're not talking about state marriage, but the covenant between husband and wife is important? Do you believe that that is central to raising children and creating a stable family, and ultimately, those are the building blocks to create a stable community? Do you believe that that central building block, the nuclear family, is an incredibly effective safeguard against government overreach, of course, reliance on government, and being indoctrinated by the leftist elites? Now, I will tell you that last objectively is true. But how important do you think it is? Okay, now you understand the catastrophe that we are facing. And it couldn't have been engineered more effectively over the long game, which is what the left has played. You've probably seen this out there, this table that shows marriage. Can you guys bring it up? People being married by 30. So it was on Twitter. Someone posted, I'm sorry, I can't give credit, but it was shared everywhere, but it didn't actually have a source. Well, we confirmed it. It is legitimate. So in 1975, most women in this country, 91%, were married by the age 30. 2025, that's down to 25 point something percent.
Wow.
Men, 1975, 81% were married. It's always been a smaller percentage of the population. Today, or 2025, 16.5%. Jeez. So we've gone respectively from 91 and 81 down to 25 and 16. Look behind you. That's the tipping point.
Yeah.
Does anyone honestly think that you will not have a, not just fundamentally different society, an unrecognizable society when you compare a society where the vast majority of people under the age of 30 are married and having families, and then the vast majority are not getting married or having children? That's the difference.
All right. Sorry, we had a quick pause there. So Crowder was basically showing a table that was saying that in 1975, it was 90+% of women were married by age 30, and now it's dropped dramatically below that. I think you just heard
said 25%.
25% for women, and I think he's about to say men are at 15% are married by 30 in 2025. That is a very low number. So I know that a lot of people say, "Oh, guys, go out and focus on your career in your 20s." I was like, well, I mean, maybe there's some truth to that for now, but it is kind of like, it feels like we've kind of gotten to a place where society is kind of not working. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but it just doesn't feel sustainable. I mean, he's going to talk about the birth rates here in a little bit, but the birth rates are also dropping. They're already below two per family, but it's dropping even below that, I believe, or maybe it's 2 per person. I'm not sure. But.
Yeah, it's like right at 2 basically, and you even think how much that would change if there wasn't with all the abortions that happen as well. But it's even crazy the percentages of 25 or of like 91% being married, however long, the 70s, and then now below 25%. And I feel like a lot of that's due to just kind of culture change, obviously, of then it was like, you're going to try to get married by the time you're probably 20 or whatever. And now I think marriage is something that like people don't have that being a goal until you've had your fun through all your 20s, until you've got to go do all your different bars and college and all those things. And then once you've made your career and are finally ready to settle down at 35, then that's the goal. And I feel like that's probably why by that age, that's kind of the drop off. But I think it's also just a lot of the culture of, women need to go get a job and need to go make it for themselves first before they should even look. And it's like when you have both parties looking to do that, now it's like marriage is so low on the priority list that it's not going to happen till really late, which I think also at the end of the day makes marriage even harder. I mean, when you both have established yourselves and have all your routines and all your things, and you are a fully formed person at 35, it's going to be a lot harder to make it work with someone else who's a fully formed person and has their routines. Not that you should rush into marriage by any means. You want to make sure you and someone else can have some good things to agree on and have a lot of similarities. But to some extent, a lot of that, I mean, that's marriage is growing together and learning more about each other and kind of doing a lot of back and forth and a lot of, give and take in that. And it's a lot harder to do if you've both had your routines for the first 15 years of your adult life.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Jacob, any thoughts?
To your question earlier before we watched that part of the clip, you were kind of asking why marriage was down so much. I think it has a lot to do. Obviously, it's a cultural thing. But what aspects of culture specifically? I think it comes from women being encouraged to go into the workforce and have careers, right? It's almost like this idea of like, well, you have to be able to take care of yourself, right? This idea in women that they have to be able to take care of themselves before they can even think about getting married and having kids. And then usually by the time they do, if they do, they can't really have kids. So I think that's one of the reasons why that number for below 30 is down significantly. And then also I think it has a lot to do with like the dating culture, right? The casual dating culture. It's still very much a thing. And a lot of people will go into relationships with no intentions whatsoever of marriage. And they're almost kind of, they're doing like the fake marriage thing. It's like marriage light, they might even live with somebody. It's basically indistinguishable from, marriage from the world's point of view. They say, oh yeah, it's like they're basically married, but they're not. They don't have that covenant under God, and then they have nothing tying them together, and they end up, well, we've been together for 6 years and now we're just going to go our separate ways and act like it never happened. And I think that is a huge contributor. I know a lot of people who have been living with their significant other for, 5+ years. And when I ask them, why don't you guys get married? They're like, well, we're basically married. And I mean, these are people who are not, they wouldn't claim to be Christians, but still, it's broadly speaking, I think that is a very big contributing factor to why this is happening. You could also make the argument that like the LGBT stuff is a contributing factor, but I think that's a pretty small percentage. The effect on that chart that we saw, I think that'd be a pretty small impact on that chart.
Yeah, and this kind of tags along with our last couple episodes about, the millennials versus boomers. And I don't think that older people understand what's really going on as well for younger people in this department. Because a lot of times you'll ask an older person or tell them about, the dating culture, and they'll just say, well, you just got to ask her out, man. And, there's a lot of guys that have asked out plenty of girls or vice versa, and it's, it just doesn't work out for a lot of people. So like, I don't know. And then in Christian circles, a lot of times, not to make it too awkward, but the P word gets blamed a lot for, these things. And that's basically end of story. It's just that, it's, that's like the whole discussion. It's just sin. And if we weren't sinners, then this would be fixed. And I think there's definitely, it is sin, right? I mean, sin is driving a lot of these issues, right? But it's multifaceted, and it's hard to kind of go through all the things. I mean, people are in less good shape today than they were in 1975. That's another thing to note. People are more obese today than they were in 1975. People have different expectations. Dating online, type culture is really like, I've used this analogy a lot, and I think people don't understand how simple things can really affect your life. But, if someone offers you 3 flavors of ice cream, you're going to pick and be very happy with your choice. They've done studies on this. Whereas if they offer you 30 flavors, all of a sudden you pick and you're kind of like, I think I don't like that one as much as I would have liked this other one. And that's kind of like dating culture now, is kind of, I think the ladies have a lot of options by and large, whereas men have fewer options. This is why men swipe right on everything, and women are swipe right on about 1 out of 100 or 5 out of 100 men for online dating. And it's just, it's like when you have a lot of options, it's hard to choose. And I kind of, to your point, Jacob, about like, did we get away from biblical, the biblical side of this, Genesis? Like, I mean, when you guys can correct me here, but when you're married, or when you're getting married, the father of the bride is supposed to hand off the bride to the husband. True or false?
That's
Walks
correct.
her down the aisle, gives her hand, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that symbol is basically a dead symbol in my mind, like in today's world, because the father has almost no influence or input on a woman's dating in today. Am I wrong about that?
I agree. I think partially that is just like Christian men needing to take charge more. I think a lot of, and that's not to at all put all the blame on men, because I think there's multiple ways, but I think to some extent, men need to just take charge. And it's like, if you want to see change, you got to start being the change. And that doesn't mean it's going to work out for you exactly, but if someone doesn't start it, then nothing's ever going to start changing or start working out. And so to some extent, I would say, I think, the guys do need to just keep going and asking out the girls. They do need to just make those efforts to work on themselves and to be a godly man. And while that doesn't always work out for them, I think creating that culture is the culture that we've lost. And I think that is why it is how it is today. I think if you have a culture of solid young men that are seeking God first and are putting him first, and then trying to find a spouse to do that with and to lead in that way, you're going to see a big difference compared to, I don't think we really have that. And I think part of that is the feminist movement, and how I feel like a lot of the 2000s, it's been like, you could get fired for saying something sexist or something like that, or like anything was considered sexist. I still think to some extent that is on the men for needing to take charge in a lot of ways that we have kind of let our guards down in some aspect.
Yeah, I just think the fathers are absent from the process basically today. And maybe we really, as a church, we should be having a discussion about how to get parents involved again in finding, because right now what basically happens is you turn 18, you get shipped off to a liberal college that indoctrinates the crap out of you. Yeah, I said crap on the podcast. You're welcome, Jacob. And you have so many opportunities to do the wrong thing in college. Like, you're in a completely new place, a new environment. You have none of your former influences a lot of the times. You may be reestablishing a church or not even going. It just seems like a recipe for total failure to me. And half the time the women come out with tons and tons and tons of debt that eventually a man who marries them inherits and has to try to pay down anyways. Right. So it's like, not to I think the financial part is a big part of this whole conversation. We've kind of talked about that in past podcasts, so we're not going to hit on it as much. But, you know, I just think there's a lot going on here. I do think we probably need to find ways to, I don't know, get fatherly influences in your life involved somehow. I don't know. Are dating apps the answer? I mean, it seems like most relationships are moving that way, like starting. Trends are the online dating is becoming the big platform now for starting of a relationship.
I don't think that dating apps are the answer, because it's still like it's not really the way that things should be. It's not the best method. Ideally, the best method is that you are physically present and you get to know people in your own community, right? You see these people, you live around these people, and you can kind of tell a little bit about somebody before you even consider like, you know, starting a relationship. So really, I think the solution is, like, I know it's probably unrealistic, but the solution is to maybe unplug a little bit, maybe have a little less online community and have a little more in-person community, a little more IRL interaction with people. I think that would help significantly. And you know, I've said this in the past, I think, in one of our episodes, but I've talked to you about it, and it's kind of an interesting example. But I do think the men are responsible. Like, you know, it's a big old snowball effect, but at the very top, it's men who are responsible for all these things that are going on in our culture today. But even if there's a whole generation of, you know, responsible men who kind of come up and rise to the occasion, there's still going to be an entire generation of women who have kind of been indoctrinated. And the analogy of, you know, the 40 years in the wilderness, there's a possibility that we're not really gonna see a change until there is another generation that comes up. Like,
I know you got some diehard views.
Yeah, I know, which is unfortunate. And honestly, will our country survive that from a birth rate perspective? Like, we look at China and we talk about how we clown on them and talk about how stupid they are for their one-child policy, which effectively, it was a de facto female birth ban. They basically aborted all the female babies. And now they're looking at the consequences of that, which is that, you know, men and women are vastly disproportionate and they're going to die out eventually. They really, without injecting people from other countries, they're basically going to die out. We laugh at that, but then at the same time, we're kind of putting ourselves in just as bad of a situation. You know, in 10, 20, 30 years, we could see ourselves in a very similar situation where we are unable to grow, and even worse, we're unable to maintain, and we're just kind of collapsing as a populace. So,
I mean, he started off by saying, like, this is the number one issue facing the country. And I mean, I think there's a good case to be made for it, because will you have a country if no one's having children, right? I mean, the only way you do have a country is if you have mass immigration, but then you're not really having your country anymore. You're kind of having another country move into your country and become your country, take over your country. That's really what is a lot of the agenda or the discussion. And so, Brogan, do you have something on that?
Yeah, well, I just think even on the birth rates and all those things, I think we've gotten so far away from the family unit, like that is just no longer even an actual, I feel like, goal. Like, I think the culture is just purely go work for a big company until you die, basically. And I think, especially from like a Christian perspective, we need to be like your children are who you're like discipling to. Like, when we're called to be disciples, I think our children are just as much a part of that as going and making disciples of other people's regions, places. I think, like, you know, that's still something we need to do in our workplace, wherever. But I think like raising up children is like the first thing I think you should be doing is raising up godly sons and daughters that love the Lord. Like, that's how you're going to impact a country in the long term the most, is by raising up another generation of godly people that are going to change the world. And like, if you can keep doing that, then you're not going to have fall-offs, drop-offs, all these things that are creating issues now. And I think it's crazy how like destroying the family unit, kind of like you talked about, is the first step of destroying that country, of taking away the godly values and principles, is to slowly get people away from thinking of that. And then not to mention, like, now that it is a standard for women to be working and for both spouses to be working, you have no way to stop that. You can't, it is very hard for people to be able to let the wife stay home if she wants to, because you almost can't afford it anymore, because it is the standard, because everyone has enough money, and because our culture and inflation and all these things have made it so that way both people have to work. It is so difficult to be able to raise kids, and you just have to go send them to public school where they can start filling their brains with a load of crap from an early age. And it's a difficult thing to break out of, and not that there's not exceptions to that, but I think that now that's just the overall culture, is both people like just don't have a family, basically. It's crazy you meet kids and parents that don't have good relationships, or kids that don't like their parents, or parents that don't like their kids, but it's because they never spent any time together. Like their entire life, the kid was at school and then sports and then daycare and then repeat. And so then they went off to college, and it's like you literally spent a total of like 2 years with your kid their entire life, and you wonder why you guys don't get along or have a relationship. It's because you never built that. You got home at 5, your kid got home at 6, you guys ate dinner and then went and watched TV all night. Like there's no actual relationship there. And so it's like, how are you supposed to create another generation of godly, or just even people with good morals and values? It just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a celebrated lifestyle now. They call it DINKS, double income, no kids. And, it's you just see a lot of different things on social media about people, celebrating how many vacations they're taking or travel spots and whatnot. And, this isn't to shame anyone who can't have kids or something like that, right? Like we're not trying to shame anybody here. We're just trying to kind of discuss
I'm okay with shaming certain groups of people.
I do think a little bit of taboos should come back a little bit, I guess.
We should be okay with shaming people who refuse to have children because they're selfish and they just want to have a fun time with their spouse.
I guess. I just, I mean, I think what Brogan's point was kind of is we're at a self-sustaining, like this problem is very hard to change because you basically both people have to work in order to survive now. We've kind of created a system where it's self-sustaining.
Or you just have to give up 2 of your vacations a year to stay home and do that. And I think that is partially where I agree with Jacob. Of a lot of it is you're going to have to make some sacrifices to do that. And again, not everyone can, but I definitely know there is people that can. But it's, we can't eat out twice a week, and we can't, have both of our cars that cost $70,000, and we can't have our vacation to the Bahamas once a year.
It's a sacrifice.
And so it's a sacrifice. And I think it's one that we need to start making a normal to take, because I don't think it's normal. And I think it's like, you have kids, but make sure you're comfortable and can afford all the things you need. So you might have to make sacrifices and not have all those things you want.
It's like, look at the families who have a ton of kids, and the only time they have another car is when they run out of seats for their kids, so they have to have another vehicle. And the only time they eat out is maybe the occasional, Sunday lunch, and it's a very big treat for the kids. They're living a great life. They're happy, and there's sacrifice involved in that lifestyle, but that. Living a life like that, building up a family like that, I think pays dividends in the future. Truly. I don't think there's anything worthwhile in life that doesn't require sacrifice. Truly.
And I'd argue that those people are happier 99% of the time than the depressed people that are going to their 2 therapists and have all the things they could ever want, but still are depressed and don't know why.
Well, I mean, the stats, self-reported happiness stats basically back this up, that single people are the least happy. Married people are happier, and married with kids are even happier. So, but it's a big gap between married and single. So it's just something for us to think about. It's not only, society is not going to be around for another generation. It's the human suffering, experienced, subjective levels of happiness, you could say, are just not as high, so people are not flourishing. We have some big problems, and we need to talk about how to start fixing those. And Brogan kind of made this point earlier. It's like the next mission field isn't even being created. If we're not having kids, that's 90% of a lot of the times who's being saved is people that are coming into Christian families, right? So, I mean, you know, a chance to evangelize like a lot. That's a lot of evangelism is that. So, not to downplay the other forms of it, but that is a very often big method of saving new people. So,
Yeah.
it is an interesting time. I don't know how to summarize, or if you guys want to, I don't know, you want to keep going on one more round on this? I feel like we've kind of covered it fairly sufficiently for the most part. It's like one of those where we've talked about the financial before on the podcast, and that's a big one. One thing I've recently been doing is asking, and maybe this is a challenge for our listeners if you're interested in a challenge. We'll give you a challenge. Hey, you didn't know you were getting a challenge today, but here's a challenge for you. Go ask one of your grandparents or an older person at your church that you know, or someone you know that's just more elderly, what life was like back in the day. And in terms of gender relations, or like how many women were in the workforce, what that was like. I've kind of been making a impromptu habit of asking people about that. And it's kind of interesting, the answers you get back. And it's like the world was a totally different place for people. A lot of these people, some have kind of had milder answers than others, but a lot of them were like, yeah, I don't remember all women working, and it was just a different type of environment. But interesting food for thought.
Yeah. So what is our message then to prevent this from just being a total black pill of an episode? What do you guys recommend that the listener would do?
It's hard. I mean, I feel like one of the things that's easier is to just at least start discussing some of the sources of the problem. And so like you can kind of get to some partial solutions, but they're all going to feel partial, right? It's like, okay, well, everyone kind of knows like, hey, if you're, in a tough financial spot as a guy, it's like, keep striving, keep going out there and trying to find a better situation for yourself. It's going to help, right? I kind of wish I'd received that advice when I was in my earlier 20s. I wish someone had been like, hey, I know you're really involved at church, and that's good, but think about your work side of your life too, because it's important. And it's important because it ties into your, hopefully one day, family life, right? So yeah, I wish I had received that advice as a guy. For women, I think, if you have a good father who's a Christian, try to leverage your father in some of these things. I don't think that's wrong. I know it's very taboo to say because, the world doesn't work that way anymore, right? But I mean, why couldn't fathers start getting together and talking to pastors at their church and be like, hey, who's a good fit for my daughter? And just like, what if we just got really countercultural? I know that's crazy to say, but I think a lot of people are kind of getting disenchanted with modern dating in general. They're just tired of the swipes, and they're tired of the awkwardness of like, oh, did you know that so-and-so asked out so-and-so last week? And it's like, a lot of people kind of are yearning for, I think, maybe I'm just crazy here, but something totally different, and maybe that's too different. I don't know. You guys tell me on the pod, but, or dear listener, but, I don't know. Those are some thoughts. Or just like, hey, if you're not as in shape as you'd like to be, like those are good things to work on, right? Your physical, your mental, your spiritual, and maybe that feels like a 1% change, but imagine if the church was doing that writ large, right? If everyone was getting 1% better every day, we were trying to be more fit, more in the word, more in community, those kinds of things, right? So it's like, I don't know, don't be too discouraged over, the trends, right? Like, and if you do get too discouraged, I know this sounds crazy to say, but life is short. And literally that's not supposed to be like a cop-out answer. Psalm 62 talks about that. Like you can go look about waiting and patience and hope in the Lord. And at the end, it talks about, well, actually we could pull it up, couldn't we? You know what? It's a podcast. We have a moment here. I've got my phone in front of me.
We have the technology.
I can flip to Psalm 62 to encourage our listeners. It starts off, for God alone, my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. And it repeats that in verse 5. And then it says in verse 6, he only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory. My mighty rock, my refuge is God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. And then verse 9 is kind of the one I was thinking of. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. And the idea there is if you're in good times or bad times, if you're in bad times, remember life is short. And if you're in good times, it's a delusion in some sense, that's what it's saying here, to my understanding. So you just remember, like, our hope is in Christ, and we know that God is our good shepherd, and he'll take you through life and provide what you need. I think that's what we have to just trust in. Is that crazy to say?
No, I think that's a good way to summarize it. And I think there's kind of two ways to look at this. But I feel like one is like Christ has to come first in your life. Like, don't try to go into marriage finding someone that's going to, like, marriage isn't going to fix your life. Marriage in itself will not make you happy. Only Christ is going to bring you true joy. And that is what I think our lives need to be centered on in all ways. I know a lot of guys that it's like, well, if I can just, once I get married, then I'll have done kind of all the things I need to. And it's like, at the end of the day, that is not how it should work. Like, we are all sinful. We have all fallen. We are all annoying to some extent. And like, if you are going into marriage thinking that, well, now that I have this person, like, I'll be happy, that's just not how it's going to work. And so putting Christ first, and I think trusting in him and seeking him, and then he will bring along what comes with that. And hopefully that's marriage. And I would say, I think marriage is something we should all strive for and work towards. Like you're saying, Kyle, like, I think it's good to, thinking about like, well, what's my future job? Like, what can I do that's going to be able to provide for a family? I also know a lot of guys that I feel like you're kind of stuck in high school for a long time, just kind of doing whatever you want. And then by the time you hit 28 and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. So I think you should have that in consideration in the back of your mind, but also just realizing, like, don't look for the perfect person because they're not out there. You're not going to find someone who is perfect in all the ways. You want to find someone that loves Christ more than you, because that is what is going to make a long, happy marriage. It isn't going to be, someone that loves you to the moon and back, as wonderful as that is. That's just, we are all sinful and fallen, and you have to find someone that loves Christ more than you, because that is truly the only thing that will make a long, happy marriage. I feel like just keeping that in mind, and that doesn't mean lowering values or not trying to find someone that you're attracted to or someone that checks boxes. Obviously, those are all good things. You want to be attracted to the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. You want to agree on a lot of the big key things, but someone that loves Christ is going to, if you're a gal, you're going to want to find someone that can lead you well, and that is seeking God, that you want to follow in that way. And as a guy, you want to be someone that can lead well, and also hopefully find someone that will trust in you and can follow you if you are leading in a Christ-like way.
Yeah, it's good. I had a pastor in New York who said one time, which I appreciate, he said, marriage can do a lot for you, but he also kind of basically said it's not everything, right? And it can do a lot for you. Marriage is a good thing. Like we opened up with, in Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone. God made a helper suitable for him. So I think that's a good thing. And I like what you said, Brogan, about really just we need to be seeking first his kingdom, his righteousness, and all the rest will be added to us. We just trust that God has our best in mind. We just keep focused on him, keep pursuing Christ, obviously be wise, in how you're trying to conduct your life, live as wisely, and ask God for wisdom and how to approach these things. I do think, as a church, we could do a better job of discussing the factors that go into why marriage rates are plummeting. I think this podcast is a good start to kind of highlighting some of those things, and I'd like to see more people in the church talking about, the root causes, because there really is it's a trend in society that this is trending down and it's not good. And so we need to, as a church, really get together and talk about this. I did have one more verse before I give it to Jacob. Proverbs 11:23, the desire of the righteous ends only in good, the expectation of the wicked in wrath. So keep expecting good things from the Lord.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Trying to think of where I was gonna go from there. I think if I had to summarize my thoughts on this in a concise message, speaking to the men mainly, because I'm not going to pretend like I understand what's going on in a woman's brain. Maybe we need to have a woman on at some point to share a feminine perspective. But to the men, you need to stop making excuses, especially if you don't have any legitimate things in your way. And if you do, pray to God that He would give you a path. But if you are just being lazy, don't make excuses. Be a biblical man, a leader. You need to have a career. That needs to be a pretty big focus in your life. It shouldn't be your entire life, but you need to be able to provide for a family. You need to be firmly grounded in your faith and be studying the Word and understand what it means to be a biblical leader and a husband and a father. You need to kind of get a grip on that stuff before you even go into it. And you need to be willing to make sacrifice. You have to be willing to make sacrifices because, like I said earlier, there's really nothing that is good in life that doesn't require sacrifice. And I think if you do all that stuff and you are willing to sacrifice a lot, then you will be much better equipped to get somewhere in life, somewhere you might want to be. Find a wife, have kids, have that perfect trad family, that existence that you so long for. That requires work. It's not easy. It doesn't just get handed to you. Give up the luxuries of life and embrace the path that God has set for you.
It's good. Brogan, any final thoughts or just...
I kind of had my rant mostly, if I'm being
All
honest.
right. I think that's about all she wrote then.
It.
Jacob just had his sign off. I think that's it from us. I still have yet to post Monday from this last episode. I will get that out as soon as I possibly can, and then this one will come out the following Monday. So next Monday, which no one knows what that is because no one knows what day we're recording, but
it's okay. It'll be out. The last episode will be out by the time
today is June
they
16th, so it'll be out next Monday for this one. But feel free to send us emails through reformordie.com if you ever want to get in touch with us, or if you know us, feel free to text. Always like hearing from people, and until next time, it's been Reform or Die. Peace.